What type of traits do you actually need to be a successful lawyer?
Someone who has a high work ethic and knows how to grind when necessary and has the ability to work long hours, because sometimes you have to be perfect. The commas matter, the semicolons matter, everything matters. And we're masters of words. Comma saves lives.
Yeah.
The requisites are doing well in high school, keeping yourself well-rounded there, then making an application to go to undergrad, getting very good grades there, maintaining that well-roundedness. So if you're not a great writer, that's a skill you can learn though. So that's not necessarily a showstopper.
What do you like about being a lawyer?
I like the intellectual rigor. So work hard, be diligent and perseverant, but maintain your sanity in the process. This is a career based on professional responsibility and ethics and making sure that you maintain that certain level of your morality at all times, because it will get challenged.
Welcome to the My Career Shop podcast, where I get to speak to people from different professions so you get an idea of what happens in the day-to-day of different careers to help you find out if this is the right career path for you. Our guest for this episode is Sumaira Shaikh, a banking attorney in Washington, D.C., who is licensed to practice law in Ontario, Canada, Massachusetts, New York, and Washington, D.C. So if you're looking to find out how to become an attorney and what to expect once you become one, tune in for the rest of the episode. How are you doing, sis?
Doing well. How about you?
Good. Welcome to the My Career Shop podcast.
Thank you.
How do you like my setup?
I love it. It's really nice, sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate it.
For those of you who don't know, this is actually my sister. She's the only one that would agree to come on my podcast. No, I'm kidding. Today, we're here to talk about the profession of a lawyer and everything that you do to become a lawyer, all of that, and partly to debunk the suits, because, you know, Harvey Specter and Mike Ross, they can just practice 56 areas of law and, you know, they're masters at everything and anything, and they close every deal. And so, I mean, I just want to let the audience know that if you become a lawyer, unlikely, but in order to debunk the myths, we had to get a real lawyer and talk to them about what do you do in law. So, but before we get started about the law, why don't you just introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Sumaira Shaikh, Omaira's sister. I work at Hunt & Andrews Kurth in the bank corporate regulatory group. So, but traditionally, I would fall under the transactional bucket of the world. I know in the U.S. specifically, they divide things in litigation or transactions. Well, I'm in the transactions world. I started my career out in Canada. I wanted to be a lawyer since I was basically in grade 2. I was 7 years old. People told me I was a little assertive, so I said, might as well monetize that. So essentially, you know, I just started, you know, school was school. I didn't really, you know, I did everything regular, like in high school and stuff, but then I dropped all my sciences when I came to grade 11 because I'm like, I don't really need this stuff if I'm going to law school. So I did mostly just, you know, social sciences, all the necessary classes that you need to be in the humanities. And then I went to University of Toronto. So for the American crowd, we have to also in Canada do 4-year undergrad and law school, just like you would have to do in the US. So it's the same model, just different schools. So I went to University of Toronto, you have to get a good GPA over there as well. So got a good GPA, and then had to do the LSAT, and then law school for 3 years. I went to University of New Brunswick. And, you know, something to think about while you're there is like you may not actually get into law school, so you have to have a backup plan. So my backup plan, because I'm very risk averse, natural fit for the legal career, I thought I would probably at least get a job if I had something like a journalism degree, so at least I could write for a newspaper. So my undergrad was in journalism. So worst case scenario, I would at least have a job. So that was kind of the mindset. And then I went to law school, fortunately got in. And then then from there, you know, the journey is I actually started as a litigator, so I can actually speak a little bit about that. And I've done both transactions. I've done litigation. My story really starts as a litigator. I did everything under the sun, from like family law, child custody. It gets messy. You have to find what you like, but I saw that I didn't enjoy litigation that much, but I really enjoyed the law. And one thing I realized was I really enjoyed securities law. So I worked on a case that was a Ponzi scheme, actually. A great story. It was essentially a church, a priest that was literally just taking money from his clergy and guaranteeing like 800% return. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Like, some of the people, they had like blind children. So we had a class litigation. All of these people came together to sue him. And I really got into the weeds on securities laws. And I'm like, this is really like intense and it's a regulatory scheme. And I'm in the weeds on the law. And it doesn't have to be litigation, it sounds like. So I slowly started researching that area, and I was like, this is really cool. So I started looking for jobs, and I landed at Capital One in a general securities role, and that was a great position. I learned a lot about just general securities laws, how to file, all your securities filings, and all those public companies that you talk about, the Nikes, they all have to file the same stuff. So I learned all of that, and I really got into the weeds. So that's something I didn't, no one even tells you about that in law school. It's like either you're a litigator or you're a transactional lawyer.
Yeah.
No one tells you that there's a whole other realm of regulatory. Like that's like completely missed. So that's what I like to do. I love regulatory stuff because I like to get in the weeds, and I just want to be in like reading statute. And applying that to real life. So that's kind of how I got to where I'm at today.
Wow, that was a lot more than I expected. You might have killed half the interview. But, no, I'm kidding. So at least I know a little bit about you. For the people that don't know, I'm a lawyer as well, and I practice. I actually have a similar story, but anyways, we're not talking about me. But I'm a lawyer as well. I know what's going on here. So how many years have you been a lawyer for?
Graduated in 2010 from law school. So we're in 2013. It's been 13 years.
You're a grandparent of the profession at this point.
At this point, yeah.
Yeah, so you know a little bit about the law then. So you said you knew in grade 2 that you wanted to be a lawyer. And I mean, I can attest to this. Why did you want to be a lawyer when you were in grade 2?
I mean, it seemed like people respected them or they looked up to them. And I liked that. And it seemed like they weren't broke. So I was like, they wear nice clothes. I like nice clothes. They seem, like they're respected, and both of those things sounded good to an 8-year-old, 7-year-old.
Give me that paper, and I like them clothes.
Exactly.
Makes sense. All right, so you made this declaration when you were really young. I remember you saying, "I'm going to be a lawyer." So I mean, you, unlike me, who made this decision significantly later in life, you knew what you were doing, and so. When you actually started, like a lot of kids that are going to be watching this, they're going to be high school students, and they're going to be people that are in the early years of their time in university, an undergraduate degree. What were the steps that you have to take in order to actually become a lawyer? So like prerequisites.
Prerequisites from an academic perspective. So what you have to do, like I said, you in high school, you have to get good grades because you just generally throughout the process of your educational career, want to make sure that your academics are strong. And so in high school, maybe you don't need all the maths and the sciences. You just need to focus on the humanities and the social sciences and just make sure your GPA is really high. So getting that 4.0 and getting the high SAT scores. In Canada, we don't have to do the SATs, but in America, that's another factor. So having a good SAT score and having a good GPA in high school. After that, getting into a good undergrad, good program is important because that kind of dictates where you're going to go for law school. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But essentially, high grades, that's probably the most important thing. And working on your time management and test-taking abilities, because we talked about the SATs, you're going to have to take the LSATs. So you're going to do 4 years of undergrad. You're going to, once again, get a good grades in high school. Then you have to get good grades in undergrad. And generally speaking, when I say good grades, I mean like 3 points, aim for a 4.0, of course, aim for perfection, but you'll probably land at 3.7, 3.8. The higher you are, the more likely you are to get into a better school. And when I say better school, I mean the Ivy Leagues is always aim for the best. And then you'll land where you land and where destiny is supposed to take you. So because sometimes you just don't get that 4.0 in every class. So that's really what it is. Get the best grades that you can, and I mentioned test taking abilities and time management. It's you're gonna have to learn how to study. That's probably one thing people don't really emphasize. It's not only about just reading things. It's about absorption and making sure that you know how to take tests in the time allotted, because that's really what the LSAT's about, and the SAT as well. So you need to know how to take tests. You could be the most smart person in the world, but not actually succeed in those tests. So you need to work on your anxiety and the ability to take tests and so forth. So all of those skills are important, but I would say the paramount point is get good grades, but at the same time, maintain your well-roundedness. So all of these schools take a look at what other extracurricular activities you're involved in. Okay, so that's great that you have a 4.0, but it looks like you don't do anything else in your life. So you can't be that either. There's numerous stories of people being rejected from the Harvards, the Yales, or even schools well below that tier. So because you're just not well-rounded, they want a class that people can share experiences. So if you like a sport, stay engaged. If you like civic organizations, stay engaged. Take leadership positions in those. Those reflect very well when you go to law school or you're applying for law school. Remember, you're going to have to write a personal statement to all of these schools. You're going to have a story, right? So maybe some of those stories will come from those organizations and your involvement, human rights organizations, whatever it is, right? Maybe get involved with international organizations. And, there's divisions at local chapters of the UN that I was, for example, involved with. So those kind of things show you're involved, you're an active participant, but also you're able to, academically achieve. Remember, the story is eventually to end up as a lawyer, and then you're going to have to be able to deliver good product in good amount of time, in a quick amount of time, and still somehow maintain your life. So if you don't create those skills of time management, being able to do numerous things at the same time and do them well, then you're not cut out for the profession. And it starts from creating that practice over life. It doesn't happen overnight. So that's kind of my advice on that point.
So we're starting off with just the prerequisites, right? So you said you have to get good grades in school. That'll dictate getting admission into a good university. And then after that, you apply to law school. And what other steps do you have to take? I mean, I know for a fact, you were talking about good academics. That stuff will haunt you for a while. If you don't have a good transcript, law firms ask you that for quite some time.
Absolutely.
And some law firms ask you that
regardless.
Like 10 years of
it
experience
doesn't matter.
later.
It's a standard requirement when you're making an application. So if, let's say, I'm 13 years out right now, if I decide to go to another firm, they will ask for my transcript. That's just part of their personnel file. It's it's part of making sure that you went to law school, and one way to know that you went to law school is your transcript. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The requisites are doing well in high school, keeping yourself well-rounded there, and then making an application to go to undergrad, getting very good grades there, maintaining that well-roundedness, taking the LSAT, getting as high of a score as possible. I think the highest you can get is 180. So like I said, aim for the 180 and then you land where you land, right? But from my recollection, I think you have to be in the 170s to kind of land at like a Harvard, Yale. The lower you get, then, the schools kind of reflect that. And there's so much data on this is like the average score of what this school accepted and what their GPA was. So all of that data is out there. Look at that. So you know what to expect and what you should be aiming for. And there's a lot of practice tests. So you're going to have to practice for the LSAT a lot and start taking that prep course if you're trying to go to law school. I would start taking that prep course in your third year. So you've been practicing for a while with the LSAT. So by the fourth year, take it, and then you're ready to make your application for law school, and then you should be good. But
Okay, so then you get into law school, and then you get out. Then what? And we can talk specifically with respect to Canada and with respect to America as well, because we know both.
Absolutely. So for Canada, which is where I completed my studies, I went to University of New Brunswick, which is in Fredericton, New Brunswick, which was a great experience. So you essentially graduate. Well, one thing is when you're in, this is probably an important piece to remember, is that in your first year law school, there's something called on-campus interviews, OCIs. So your first year of law school and its grades will kind of dictate how well or how easy your next couple years will be in terms of how much you're going to get paid, or you're going to have to, are you a late bloomer? I was a late bloomer. So I adjusted to law school. So my first year grades weren't that great, but I bloomed later. But I would say that focus hard in your first year to get those high grades, because there's on-campus interviews and firms come from all over the country on campus and they interview you on the spot. And that dictates whether you're going to get a summer position with that law firm. Of course, I'm touching base primarily on law firms. There's other routes, but I'm primarily just focused on the most traditional route. We can talk more if you would like about alternative routes. But the traditional route is going the law firm route. And the main thing that those firms look at is your grades. So first year grades, I would say, is paramount to make your life seamless, easier. I think they come, I forgot when they come, to be honest, at this point, but I know they come relatively easy. So they're looking at your first semester grades at that point. So really that first semester of first year to see if in the summer of second year, you're going to be interning with them. So yeah, do very, very well. And then there's also OCIs second year for those again, and then you'll have another summer with them. So the folks that got that first summer, they will continue on with that firm, right? But they still come the second year. So you do have another kick at the can, but it becomes difficult because you didn't do as well and you haven't had enough time to build out your grades to show that you have what it takes. And really firms are looking at grades. They do interview you, you see personality, but those are 15, 20-minute interviews. I mean, you have to be pretty exceptional to be able to like impress someone so quickly that they're going to overlook the fact that, you know, you didn't do so well when there's like 15 other candidates that did way better than you.
Like Mike Ross.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Who didn't even go to law school. So anyway, so you see what I'm saying, but I think my advice is just you have to kill it in the first year. Barring
situations where you can recite the entire law
exactly,
verbatim.
Exactly.
No, I'm kidding.
You know, like those 20 minutes, I don't think it's going to happen. So like if you don't do that and you don't do very well in law school, it's not the end of the world, but you're not going to land at a big firm. You're going to have to end up at a smaller, even though I graduated overall very well in my class, because I didn't have that first year. Essentially, I ended up at a smaller firm, having to apply to go through different hoops to get to where I'm at.
This is an understatement, by the way. I'd just like to point out she was first.
But anyway, I
first, but yeah, not first year. I get it.
But my first year was not that great. So that's the consequence, right? So you're gonna pay for it because it's extremely competitive. So just make sure that you know you're focused on that first year.
Okay, so we got out of law school. All right, first year, second year is important, not just from like the perspective of OCIs, but just in general. They're going to look at your transcript for the rest of your life. And so you're out of law school. Let's go Canada first, I guess. We'll just do a quicker recap. So in Canada, how do you actually become a lawyer after you graduate from law school? Do you even remember?
Yeah, I do remember. It's not 23 years, it's only 13. But anyway, so when you graduate, actually even before you graduate, I mean, depending on which province you're writing the bar for, you're already studying for the bar. Like you get the materials, I think in April. You're probably not studying it because you still have to write your own exams for school. But, as of May, you're studying really hard because you're going to be I took the Ontario bar. So I took the Ontario bar. In Canada, we have something called the barrister examination and then the solicitor examination. So there's like 2 big packets, at least when I went, that you studied, and then you took that. And the first one, I think it was barrister that I took first. And then you have 2 weeks in between.
Yep.
And then you write the solicitor examination. And then that's all in July.
And November.
Okay.
It happens twice a year.
Okay.
I
Perfect.
mean, at least as of when did I become a lawyer? 2017?
I wrote mine in
2010.
Yeah. I wrote mine in 2010. And so you write those exams and hopefully you do well and you pass. And then you have passed the bar, but in Ontario, in Canada, generally, you don't automatically just become a lawyer. You have to do what they call articling, which is a 10-month internship. Essentially, you're paid okay money, decent money to basically, you're not particularly knowledgeable at that point.
I was paid $30,000.
Which is, I guess, not decent.
Jesus Christ.
You can buy a sandwich.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it was tough times, man.
The assumption is you're staying with your parents still.
Yeah. I mean, we're millennials. We're all staying with our parents.
Exactly.
Okay. The Ontario bar exam, as far as I can remember, as of 2017, was a completely multiple choice exam.
Mm-hmm.
So you write the Ontario bar exam and then you do articling, which is basically working under the supervision of a lawyer for 10 months.
10 months, yeah.
But Ontario also came up with another scheme to allow people to become lawyers. I forget what the name is, but it's essentially a program.
Mm-hmm.
And you spend, I think, 4 months learning certain requisite skills.
Yeah.
And then you spend 4 months in a placement with some firm that has volunteered that, essentially free labor for them. Or you get paid a nominal amount.
But remember, you're trying to get your license. And
Yeah, exactly.
Also, we appreciate the province doing that because at my time, you didn't have the alternative and you would struggle to find an articling position. If you do not find an articling position, thanks for wasting your time at law school and all that money. You will not become a lawyer. So we appreciate the province. And at that time it was the Law Society of Upper Canada. Now it's the Law Society of Ontario, that they took those measures to provide an alternative, because if you don't get that articling, at least there's a program to allow you to get your license. Yes, it's a little bit of, you're going to be tight for a little bit, but at least you'll be a lawyer, and then the rest is up to you and how life goes. But at least you get your license.
Exactly.
So.
And that makes a big difference. So this is how you become a lawyer. You go to undergrad, then you write the LSAT, then you go to law school, then you come out and you write the bar exam, and they can be done in any order. You can go articling or licensing process and bar exam, but all of that has to be completed. Then you will get called to the bar in the province of Ontario. So I guess I should just ask you on that. Can you practice law anywhere once you get your license?
Once you get your license in Ontario, I know that there's memorandums of understanding between the provinces. So I don't know, to be honest, because I've never had to, go to, for example, Alberta or anything like that. But I understand that once you pass the bar in one province, there are ways to practice in other provinces. But if you're going cross-border to the United States, which is what I did, yes, there is a route, and you know this too because you've done this as well, which is, you have to check the reciprocity rules and the rules of admission. But if you're a Canadian lawyer, there's avenues for entry and for you to take the New York bar and Massachusetts, because probably some loyalist connection there to the British Empire. They have a list of all the schools specifically in Canada that allow you to essentially write the Massachusetts bar. And that's very unique because they have document that lists it out, and there's no exception for any other country other than Canada. So that was very interesting. So I wrote the New York bar and the Massachusetts bar because, like I said, backup plan. I was like, everyone scared me so much about the New York bar, I was like, okay, well, I'll just write like Massachusetts right there. So I wrote it in Albany and I drove over to Boston, which is like a 3.5 hour drive. And just did that back to back because I was like, if I failed the New York bar, at least maybe they call Massachusetts Passachusetts. So I was like, I'll maybe pass that. But mind you, that's not a great statement because a lot of people writing that is like they went to Harvard and like Massachusetts, really. So yeah, I did that back to back so that, if I failed New York, I'd have Massachusetts. So that was kind of another province, another state that you can do, the 2 states, New York and Massachusetts. And then another one I think you can do is California, but there's a lot of rules. And I mean, I couldn't do it because I would have to take a flight to do it that would be difficult logistically, but I considered it. And I think that might be the only, I don't think there's any other state that allows you to. But New York, the other thing to keep in mind is in New York, if you just get New York or another state, it allows you to be in-house in many places in the United States, which is what I did. I went to Capital One. You can just get corporate counsel designation at most companies and still be a lawyer. But there's all sorts of rules you have to check. Most states you have to have practiced for 5 years before they allow you in, which is what I did in Washington, D.C. So
3 now.
Yeah, now it's 3 after the pandemic. So
I'm a beneficiary.
Exactly. So there's a lot of rules. So if you want to get into the U.S. market, there's a way, but read the rules.
This is primarily for the U.S. So I know we're talking prerequisites. It's not that different here either. Undergrad first, then LSAT, then law school, then you write so now it's called the UBE, the Unified Bar Examination.
My time it wasn't. It was the MBE.
Yes. And after you pass the bar exam, which is a beast of itself, I guess not Massachusetts, but maybe they're part of the UBE now.
I think so.
But so the Unified Bar Exam essentially allows you to, depending on the score that you get, they basically allow you to practice. I guess some states are dumber, some states are smart. I don't know.
True.
But at the end of the day, they grant entry based on your score. Do well. It's a long exam. It's 2 days, 8 hours each one. But in America, you don't have any articling requirement. After you pass the bar exam, you get called to the bar and then...
Yeah, I don't think they call it call to the bar in the United States.
What do they do?
You just get admitted. I think it's admitted.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So that day was hazy for me because I was going to a bachelor party. I don't know if you remember.
Yes, I remember. Yes.
And so I was kind of in a rush. I was like, do I have to go to this?
Yes, you do. You have. Yeah. And that's another thing. You have to be physically present. They will not mail you.
I was so irritated. So I had to fly to New Orleans. And before that, I had to go to Albany.
Albany, yeah, that's where I got admitted as well. Oh, one thing we didn't mention in the United States, there's also something called the MPRE that you have to write.
Oh yeah.
Yes. So in addition to the bar exam, you need to take the multi-state professional responsibility examination, which you can do even I think in your 4th year at law school. 3rd year in law school. It just needs to be done before you're fully admitted. It's an ethics exam, and to me, it was easy because I think my moral code isn't that off. But apparently, people struggle. I'm like, okay. But yeah.
They're also tricky questions. I mean, I did get it in the first time.
Yeah.
But I remember practicing and I was like, these both sound ethically sound. And
I think you're a little off.
Yeah, I passed it the first time, all right? And pass is high. I think pass is 80% or something.
Yeah, you have to... Yeah, do well. But I've heard of numerous people who've passed the bar, which is the substantive harder part. And they have taken the MPRE numerous times because their ethics are all off. So, or their professional responsibility is all off. I don't know what to say.
Maybe they're a nervous test taker. Well, obviously not.
If they pass the bar, I'm like, I don't know what to say. Maybe this is a good check to make sure you never enter the profession. But anyway, you need to make sure that you're ethically sound by taking this exam. So
That's a good point. So you pass the bar exam, then you write the MPRE, and you're a lawyer.
Or you might write the MPRE and you write the bar exam. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter what order. So we spoke before, and remember, most of the people that are going to be listening to this don't actually know the difference between firm, in-house, and all that stuff. So I want to know, you got your bar to New York, right? Can someone from New York practice in Texas?
Yes. I mean, practice what kind?
At a law firm.
At a law firm? I think so. You would have to check the rules. I think there's reciprocity, maybe. If there isn't, then no.
There isn't any reciprocity.
No? Then, yeah, you can't. So you have to write the bar in Texas. So that's one thing you have to look at, reciprocity between states.
Yeah. I believe if you, and honestly, we're not experts on this, so.
This is a whole different session of, like, it's probably a CLE on state reciprocity or something.
CLE is continuous legal education, by the way. But I know California does not give a damn where you got your bar from.
Yeah.
And there's good reasons behind that. They have the most laws.
Weird property laws, yeah.
Weird everything laws.
Yeah.
They have weird, not weird. They just have
eccentric.
I know if you're a litigator, you can get these pro
of each,
right?
Yeah.
And that'll allow you to essentially practice for like a particular client in a state for a period. But and I know if you have a state bar, you can practice as in-house counsel, which is basically for a company, right?
Yeah. So that's what I did. So I was admitted to the New York bar. I became technically an attorney in the United States. So what I then did was I became corporate counsel at Capital One. That's Capital One's headquarters in Virginia. So that's a Virginia corporate counsel. So still had to like do all this paperwork. You have to submit that. You still go to Richmond where you get admitted and sworn in as an attorney. So, but I didn't have to do any like examination for that. So that is also an option. The in-house option is another route altogether. But yes, you can practice. It's just how you're going to practice. Now, if you wanted to be at a firm after writing the New York bar, then you have to look at reciprocity rules, which we touched on. So you may or may not be able to do that.
It's especially if you work for a law firm. If you want to work for a law firm, they care a lot about whether you're, I mean, it makes sense, whether you're actually licensed in the jurisdiction to practice. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you're going to have to make sure about this, but that's okay. That's time for a different talk. I want to talk more about what type of traits do you actually need to be a successful lawyer?
That's
and what type of like traits would you consider a red flag for somebody? Like if you are certain characteristics, if you're a certain personality, you shouldn't be a lawyer. Or at least you tell that person like, bro,
don't do it. I've had to kind of say that to some people. But I think the traits that are desirable or necessary ingredients to being an attorney are, attention to detail. And strong work ethic. You can have attention to detail, which is just absolutely necessary because the commas matter, the semicolons matter, everything matters. And we're masters of words, and the wrong type of comma, wrong type of, anything in punctuation can have consequences in interpretation that a judge can use against you, essentially. So that's the level of detail that's required. This is a profession that we chose. So attention to detail. And then because of that, you need to have the underlying characteristic of work ethic and hard work built in, because it's kind of annoying to be like working that hard to make sure that commas and semicolons and everything is perfect. So you have to be someone who has a high work ethic and knows how to grind when necessary and has the ability to work long hours, because sometimes you have to be perfect or close to perfect. No, what's perfect, but close to perfect under time constraints. And you have to read a lot of background information that infuses into whatever you're drafting or preparing. So, or if it's a brief for litigation, or you have to go through all sorts of, diligence materials or documentation to prepare your brief, and same for transactions. Like you have to go through a lot of information to prepare and understand the client's business to prepare the transaction documents. So no matter which way you go, there's a lot of work there, and the standard is near perfection. And I won't lie about that. That's real. If you're extremely easygoing, so transitioning to characteristics that you should probably kind of steer clear. I mean, if you're, very easygoing, which kind of infuses into, like you don't care for details, it's like, it's good enough. Don't do this. There's other professions out there that, are okay with that.
And want you to do that.
And want you to be that. Like, I'm not going to say those because I'm not in those professions, but this is not one of them. So like, people, your literary skills have to be really good. Like, you need to learn how to write and write well. So if you're not a great writer, that's a skill you can learn though. So that's not necessarily, a showstopper. I think it's really those characteristics of work ethic, hard work, diligence, and attention to detail. You have to, have perseverance. Sometimes you do not find answers. Even till this day, sometimes a partner will send me something and I'm like, I'm searching. I can't find an answer. You gotta keep looking. And it's frustrating. And you have to persevere. So, that kind of work ethic is necessary. And I think that if you don't have that drive, if you don't have that desire to find answers, the curiosity, and specifically attention to detail, and like work ethic, really, then there's other places that I think that this is not your calling.
I couldn't agree more. I know it sounds kind of rough, but that's just how it is. At the end of the day, I've been grilled over emails, for instance, and just like you have to be so succinct. And you have to make sure that you don't have any admissions in your emails. You have to make sure that, you read things like 100 times over. I mean, I don't know if you remember, I got cussed out by my partner once. It wasn't even actually my mistake. And
that doesn't matter, by the way. You'll learn.
It
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter if it's your mistake or not. If you're touching the product, it's your mistake at that point.
Yeah.
And pardon my French, but I remember, and this is nobody that I currently work with, by the way. So he was just like, when you send me work product like this, you're basically telling me to fuck myself. Omer, why are you telling me to fuck myself? And I'm like, Jesus Christ, I swear I wasn't telling you that. But nonetheless, some horror stories. Still traumatized. Needless to say, I check my work products significantly more now. Okay, so attention to detail, work ethic, perseverance. Literary skills definitely develop over time, because I think even if you're a good writer, a legal writer is different. No
one talks like a lawyer, notwithstanding the foregoing, provided further, however. Like, no one talks like that.
If you actually run grammar,
we'll tell you
grammar,
don't speak English.
If and in the event are always, anyways. But nerd jokes. But this is essentially what we were dealing with an agreement today. And I kid you not, we were arguing over a semicolon and a comma. We're negotiating. We were trying to finish. It is Saturday. It sucks, but
it happens sometimes.
Yeah, and we were arguing over, not arguing, I guess, but everyone was just like, no, that comma now it doesn't make sense. But it's true.
It's true. It didn't make sense.
You'll learn. But this is the profession that you're coming into. These things become very interesting.
You have to care about commas.
Yeah. The commas matter.
Commas matter. Comma saves lives.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you don't work in the profession, like what you don't know is sometimes you're working on like multi-million and billion-dollar deals, right? So I mean, I work as a contract attorney. I mean, all the time contracts are in excess of like tens of millions of dollars, and these are banks and big bodies that really, really want to make sure you get the contract right. So
And they're paying you well, right?
yeah,
The firms pay you well, and the clients are paying the firm well for that. So, it's also just being honest with your time, having that work ethic, respecting your client, that they are hiring you for your expertise. So do your job. And so, and just be honorable with your time, and, just do the right thing, because, you want to make sure that you deliver the product that they're expecting. And that's why they're paying you for it. Like, they want you to care about that comma, because if that comma can hurt them in the future, they want to make sure that you thought about that. And that's exactly why they pay you whatever it is, 400, 500, 600, 700, whatever the hourly rate is.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. I mean,
a junior gets charges at any big law firm in America. You will be paying $5.95 an hour for a junior's rate,
which is ridiculous, but
a partner goes up to, I believe,
thousands,
$1,300.
yeah, 13, 14. I don't
Well,
even know.
I mean, it
depending
goes
on
even
the firm,
more.
it could
Yeah.
be even 2,000. So,
But hey, I'll tell you this: those partners are beasts. I would consider myself. I'm reasonably smart, and you go around these partners, and you're like, Jesus Christ! I mean, their ability to look at a document, like their eyes just somehow like pick problems, and you're like,
that's what they do. And that's like a different conversation of how do you develop over time, and like where do you land? Like, they're at the point where they're issue spotting, and they're just picking. They want us to be looking at the commas and all that kind of stuff to make sure things are tight and where they should be. But they issue spot, like, this is a problem. This needs to be addressed. It needs to be revised. And, that's all they do. They just pick big issues and then they let it go. But that's what they're there for. They're the bird's eye view. So
one thing I want to go into is, like, on a very granular level, what does your day look like? You wake up, grab a coffee, and do you drink coffee? You do daily?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What do you do? I don't even care if it's law related or not. Just take me through a day.
Through a day. Okay. Well, it also kind of depends, because after the pandemic, work is largely at home and remote. That is transitioning back to the office. These are the times we're in. So now that I know, all millennials, I mean, it is what it is. But anyway, that's a separate topic. Return to work. So on the days that I return to work, and I go to the office, there's a couple days that I go, well, at this point I go one day, but
let's just talk about day at the office, because that's where we're heading. Like, I mean,
that's the reality, and that's what it was. So, and honestly, like, for folks that are starting out, I think that's the expectation. You should try to be in the office as much as, I mean, we love our pajamas. We love working in our pajamas, on our sofa, all over the place.
With a dress shirt on.
With a dress shirt. There's a time and a place for everything. So even though I enjoy it, I won't lie. I think that as a junior, as you're coming into the profession, you need to develop relationships, and there is really no way to do that but in person. So I will absolutely say that, that as much as I don't like it, I agree that there is absolutely utility to being in person for juniors. So you just learn better. And you create better connections. Like, there's people in the firm right beside you. You can ask them questions, and like what people do. There was all sorts of issues that could come up in contracts. As you know, there might be litigation matters. And if you're at the firm, you can just pop by and say, hey, you're in litigation. Can you help me with this? Or can you tell me who I should talk to? But if you're just in your room, in your pajamas, you don't have those connections. You're not building those internal firm networks. So, but my usual day, you had asked, to going into the office, I get up, I live about 35 minutes away from the office. So, but I take the metro. So I get up and, go try to get ready as quickly as possible. I usually am scrambling, so I don't get my coffee at home. And so, I just get ready and get into my car, go to the park and ride, get into the metro, park and ride that takes me to the metro, and then I get to the office, and then there, I get my coffee there. I have to have my Java before I start working, and then I just log on and I check my voicemail on my phone. Everything's routed to my cell phone at this point, but I check that. I check emails, like pressing matters. And then, I then take a piece of paper and I draft my deliverables for today. I mean, I do that every day. So usually I pick up some of the stuff from yesterday that I didn't get to, that were lower down the list. So those, if they're as high priority, they become number 1, number 2 on my list. So just kind of take a second and think about what you need to do today. I would say that's probably the most important thing, to just kind of ground yourself from a work perspective. And then it's important to do that. If you see like you have like 35 emails, I would do the grounding before you go through those 35 emails. But because before you know it, and 35 emails is very normal, by the way, I'm not even exaggerating, because you don't want to get lost and take an hour going through those emails and then you just feel overwhelmed because you should have organized your thoughts so you know what your action plan is. So have an action plan. That's what I do. And then I start knocking them out, like start preparing documents, doing what I need to do, reaching out to clients, sending emails. That's kind of what I do. And then once I shoot through the most important things, I wrap up and I go home.
So that's a normal day. So you're like a very senior associate. Do you have to do any client work?
What do you mean by client work?
Do you have to meet clients, things of that nature?
Yes, from time to time. There's in-person meetings. Sometimes there's meetings with regulators on behalf of clients that we do in person. And then, sometimes they're socializing with clients. We go for lunches, we go for dinners, those kind of things, especially when, a deal closed and we're all happy. So those kind of things. So yes, I do work with clients directly, but now work has very much morphed to a lot of phone and Zoom calls. So my clients are all over the country. A lot of them are in Texas. I work in banking and like financial institutions. So a lot of banks, credit unions. So obviously they're all over the country. I have clients in Vermont, for example. So sometimes you fly out, but majority of the time it's just phone calls and emails.
Cool. So you're a banking attorney, you said, and you said you spend most of your day doing like reviewing your emails and doing work. What do you do specifically as a banking attorney?
So like I said earlier, I really like regulatory stuff. So the securities laws are kind of what got me interested into the regulatory realm of law. So my job is kind of almost like a bridge with your work because you do a lot of contractual work, but it's less regulatory. Mine is very regulatory tied to contracts. So if I were to summarize what I do, it's a lot of capital raising. So raising capital. When I say that, it's like raising money for banks when, they want to go expand their business or they need to open up another branch. They need money to do that. And that's you need to raise capital. So I help banks and credit unions do that. I also a lot of M&A activity. So when I say M&A, I mean mergers and acquisitions. So banks buying banks, individuals buying banks, credit unions buying banks, all that kind of stuff. That's another part of my job. But because it's banking and financial institutions, it's extremely regulatory. And even you have to get into, there's all sorts of rules. Not everyone can buy a bank, you would think so, but that's not the case. And there's all these rules regarding deposit accounts and you have to read
tried.
Kanye tried. Yeah. Of course he did. But like all these rules tied to who can own a bank, who can't own a bank, how do you own a bank? Those are the rules that I get into, all the applications that are required. So unlike, you could be a mergers and acquisitions attorney without having the regulatory aspect. Because, for example, if you're just two engineering firms, there's no regulatory body necessarily above you that you need to make an application to. But when it comes to banking, you touch anything. Remember, people are putting their money in your institution. There's laws that dictate like how that's going to go. So you have to reckon with all the the powers that be to make sure that, our deposits are safe. So full faith and credit of the United States is at stake. So that's what I do. And the same thing with capital raising money. You can't just take money from people. There's all these rules in securities laws to protect people from the kind of Ponzi schemes that I was telling you about that got me interested in this, to make sure that, capital is raised fairly and not from people who don't have the ability to lose money.
So it's funny, I'm a contracts attorney, but because a lot of the clients are banks, regulatory just pops in. And recently I've had to delve into that work, and I'm not a fan, but nonetheless, you got to do it because there's a lot of regulatory bodies involved in third-party outsourcing. And that's what contract lawyers typically do. I'm in the tech space. But yeah, so I've had to read FDIC, OCC, all that policy, and just make sure our clients are actually doing everything, which, I mean, you do what you got to do, but I'm not a big fan of that. I just like my contracts. But I mean, I end up reading a lot of that anyways. So you're a banking attorney. Let's get back to that. You stick to your job, okay? And let me have mine.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the important point, right? Like, some people really like the connection between transactions and regulatory. I like the balance of, and like, having them both, because when I'm doing regulatory stuff, I feel like I'm practicing law still. That's what I loved about being a litigator. Like, you're reading case law. This is like active law in development. And I felt like if I became a contract lawyer, I'm like, you're just basically a glorified business person that knows how to write. I mean, that sounds crass, but that's what I thought. And I didn't know about this regulatory realm that essentially bridges the gap between litigation and contracts, because you have to know the law. No one understands what those statutes say. You have to read the regulations, you have to read interpretations, you have to read all this guidance to make sure that you understand it. It's supposed to be accessible to the citizens, but it's really not. So that's where lawyers come in. But I really enjoy it. But as my brother just said, he does not. So
I mean, I do it. But I mean, I practice as a litigator as well. I felt that was really different. Mm-hmm. Reading case law is a lot more interesting to me than statute.
Because it's a story.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, judges are just incredible authors. I mean, their decisions, I'm just like, wow, what is this poetry? And so, I mean, it's different. And in the beginning, I remember it was kind of difficult to understand, because each sentence was like loaded with information. Like, once you actually get into the weeds, you're like, wow. I mean, you can admire work, right? And so, I mean, judges are just like another level. But anyways, so we talked about some of the normal stuff you do during the day. What are some random ancillary administrative things that you have to do as a lawyer that is, I mean, I'm guessing it's annoying. But
I guess the annoying part is time entry business. So at big firms, like, generally the standard is you bill 2,000 hours. Yes, some firms give you credit for different things. Like my last firm gave credit for like even interviewing. So if you do that, you get credit towards the 2,000. There's caps, like at the firm that we're at, like you get pro bono credit, you get diversity and inclusion credit, all this kind of stuff. So the 2,000, but generally, the very least, you have to bill most firms 1,800 hours billable to a client, roughly 1,750, 1,800. Sorry. So what does that mean? You have to actually enter that time into a system. So that means all of those emails, when I'm reading them, I have to like put it to a client, point one, and point one is basically an increment of 6 minutes. You should make sure that you have to track your time and be very honest about it. There's all sorts of rules of professional responsibility and ethical obligations tied to that. Don't fall into the trap of making up time. It's unethical. You can lose your license. But that's annoying. It doesn't change the fact that it's annoying. So that's probably the most annoying part, time entry. And the fact that, it's almost like every single minute of your life is monetized. I guess you can see it the other way and say, oh, every minute is worth it and I'm so valuable.
Self-important much?
Exactly. If you want to glorify yourself, but the other way is it's like I feel like this is not great. I'm literally, monetizing every minute, and I have to like account for every single minute. So that's probably the most annoying thing. And I guess like the other stuff that you eventually have to start thinking about, especially in the firm route, is business development. I wouldn't say that's annoying, but like that means like you have to go to conferences, you have to go out and see clients, you have to develop relationships. That happens quite naturally when you work with clients. So you just essentially like at a certain point you become friends with some. That just happens naturally for some folks. But if it doesn't, then you're going to have to make more concerted effort. But that's another thing that you have to keep in mind to develop relationships and eventually bring in more business. That's the intent, that these people that you develop relationships with eventually should be making money for you. So
maybe somebody's watching right now and they'll reach out to us. Amir Shaikh, in the event you need any help with technology contracts and you can afford a big law firm, feel free to reach out to me. Would you like to give a little spiel about yourself?
Likewise, you selling a bank? Call me. Buying a bank? Call me.
Big bank, buy small bank.
Exactly.
All right. I know we also got to get legal education, continuous legal education.
Yes.
That's another thing. Yeah, I think that would be
I think continuous legal education depends on the state. So, for example, those are state driven. So, like, I'm admitted in New York. So if you have any jurisdiction that has a continuing legal education requirement, you have to satisfy that. I'm in New York. New York certainly does. So it's about 12 hours per year. But New York is, you register and renew your registration with them on a every other year basis. So it's like 24 hours. And they tell you what kind of hours, what's eligible, what's not eligible. So you have to do about 24 hours every 2 years, which isn't that bad. It's 12 hours. So, I mean, you just have to, another thing to track, in the massive things, like you have to work, and then you have to, try to have a life, and then, do all those things, and business development, time entry, and CLE, so, and then you have to pay those fees. That's an important thing to remember. Don't lapse on your fees. Your license will get suspended.
And then you have to deal with that.
Yeah, deal with that.
In addition to billing hours and CLE.
And CLE and client work and stuff. So don't do that. Usually you have assistants at firms that can help you stay on top of that. But ultimately,
I haven't seen these assistants.
I know, but ultimately it's your obligation to make sure that you don't lapse. So I've never lapsed, and I hope that never happens.
You use the forbidden word. Never.
Yeah, never. I know.
Whenever you say that. But okay, for my CLE stuff, I pretty much just save the certificates and put them in Google Drive.
Yeah.
And then I have like a little ticker that calculates. I know, weird.
You have to keep track some way. So
yeah,
whatever works for you.
DC doesn't require it.
Yeah, but you have to satisfy New York.
Exactly. So got to do it anyways. And anyways, it's a stupid question, but would you say the profession of law is stressful?
Yeah, of course.
Talk to me a little bit about that. Like, what makes it worse? What makes it better? Like,
what makes it stressful, you mean?
Yeah, everyone knows the profession of law is stressful. But
yes.
As a banking attorney, what would you say makes your life stressful, and what makes it easier? Like, how would you make your life a little bit easier now that you're a lot more experienced?
I think that what makes it stressful is sometimes it's client expectations. And then number two is partners that don't know how to manage client expectations. So I think what makes it better is when I have more control. I create generally good relationships with my clients. Then when you have that relationship, you can manage client expectations because you're like, hey, listen, this is what's going on. I know we talked about this deadline. Can we make it this deadline? And if it's doable, they say, sure. If not, then they say, no, I really need it. And then you're like, okay. So, you create that dialogue and you create those relationships and so forth. When you have that direct channel with the client, it's less stressful. So that's really the aim. When you are working through other channels and there's other people managing relationships, that's their personality and how they like to manage relationships, then you're really subjected to them. Some people are client pleasers. Client says jump, you jump. They say how high, they try. And that's generally how it is. We are in client services, and I think absolutely, clients come first, but there also has to be, you have to learn how to manage client expectations, because clients sometimes want things that are just not possible, or are unrealistic. Or if you try, it's not going to be the product that you would be proud to put your name on. So sometimes it's like, oh, I want to close this deal by the end of the week. Well, it's a merger. It's not going to happen in a week without being negligent, right? So you have to manage client expectations. So I think that's the largest source, and partners and how they manage relationships. But that's the kind of the thing. Like when you're at a firm, you don't even necessarily only have clients to manage. You also have to manage your relationships internally. And some folks even call your partners who you work with your internal clients. Yeah. So you have to you have to make sure they're happy too. So trying to maintain deadlines that they've set and all that kind of stuff adds stress to your life. And I think that you can lessen that stress the more independent you become over time, and create better relationships, and you can have more flexibility in your life.
Well, partner management is a thing, because I mean, the workflow, partners are only going to trust you if you create a good work product. And if you create more work for your partner, they're going to be like, okay, I'm going to give it to this other guy. That's going to make less work for me, obviously, because they already have a gazillion things to do. After like a few years or maybe months, do you feel like your job gets redundant?
See, my situation is a little unique because my group does a lot of different work. So we do, like I said, capital raising, mergers and acquisitions, but we do a lot of regulatory, which means like when our banks and credit unions are in trouble, we're doing regulatory enforcement. We're responding to regulators directly and saying, nope, we disagree. And this is why. So like it's like quasi litigation, but not really, So I think, and then we do a lot of random like corporate work, a lot of securities work. So honestly, like there's not a lot of redundancy. Yes, when you're doing mergers in and out or doing capital raising in and out, it gets redundant. But by and large, I don't feel like my job is redundant or I'm getting bored, because there's always something new and I'm always learning something new. So, but I do know that there's certain groups where you're literally duping the same thing again and again. And I have been in that situation where if you are in that situation, you need to get out of that situation, because you are being pigeonholed and you are not that valuable if you stay there. So, for example, I was at another firm doing mostly securitization for big banks. And guess what? The only thing you really do is change the designation of that securitization. If it's 2023, well, and there's a second issuance, you're changing 2023-1 to 2023-2. And you're just verifying, updating dates, stuff like that, because those documents don't change much. You check a couple things. I'm not saying it's literally just dates, but there's not a lot. And they've done it that way. Those are huge programs to, securitization programs that, they don't want to rejig documents much. Everything is just duped and revised and reissued. You don't want to be in those kind of practices, because you're not exercising that legal brain, and you want to be learning, and you want to be you didn't work this hard to just be like in a mundane job. So like, make sure if you ever end up in that situation, you get out.
Yeah, I think it's person to person. I think some people prefer redundant, right? Because like at least their life gets easier. But like, for instance, I remember litigation, it got easier in the sense that the process started making more sense. Like, oh, you file a motion and then you actually attend, and a few weeks before that, you have to do this and this. So you understand the procedural aspect much better. But in terms of writing a story, every single one was different, right? And writing a complaint, or in Canada, a statement of claim, that's very important. And I mean, the story that you give the judge is all that they know. And so, I mean, that part was always new. Right. And it was tough sometimes because you're exhausted and you have to tell a good story still.
Yeah.
Right. But whereas in contracts, right? My banking stuff is always bizarrely different. But some of the SaaS contracts, software license contracts, they get easier and easier. So I feel like any field has elements where there is a redundant aspect to it, and there are aspects that are always changing. I mean, like every single day, I feel like I learned something new. So I mean,
Absolutely. And I think, try to find a space that you enjoy and has versatility. If you enjoy that, right? Like you said, like some people like redundancy. They want to be like, hey, I'm getting paid the same thing for changing a number. For some people, that's great.
do you? Boo?
Do you? But for me, at least personally, I like versatility and so forth. So, recognize who you are, because you will have a time in your profession where you'll feel like you're unhappy, and you have to ask why. And if you're unhappy, it could be that you're bored. It's not that you don't want to be a lawyer. It's just that you're bored of this specific thing that you're doing, and it's time for change. So ask the right question to recognize what is bothering you and address it. And for me, at least at certain points, it was like, I'm not getting challenged enough. I'm not getting the work I want and stuff. So
Nerd alert.
Yeah, I know. That's definitely a lot of the changes that I've made. I'm like, nah, this is not it. I'm not being challenged enough, or, I'm just not getting the work I want, or something like that. So, so that's kind of, just know yourself. Everyone's different, but if something's causing an annoyance, ask yourself the question, what do you think it is? And navigate accordingly.
Fair enough. So a major reason why a lot of people become lawyers is the money. Let's talk a little bit about money.
I got a wheelbarrow out there. Just joking. That's what they say.
Really?
Yeah, the wheelbarrows of money that we have.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, that's my first partner that taught me in litigation. That's what he was like, yeah, where's my wheelbarrow? Let me take that out.
That's funny. I haven't heard that. I've had the opportunity to work both big law, and big law is just a term
for all the big law firms in the US.
Yeah. So AM Law 100,
or top, even 200 or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. I think they have to generate a certain amount of revenue to be part of this list. And if they say big law, it basically means
certain expectations.
You're paying extortionate rates. That's. But I understand there's a reason why they have all the resources, right? So like if you go to a small law firm, they don't have a
document
data privacy
service
group. They don't have document services. They don't have there's like 40 departments in all of these big law firms and you can leverage all of their expertise to get you a very, very strong work product, right? And so, if you don't know about this, like contracts range between like 10 pages all the way to like 500. So, sometimes within those 500 pages, there's like 20 different competencies, right? And so within those 20 different competencies, some law firms have them. The big law firms typically do. Anyways, but if you work for big law, how do you get paid? And we've both had the opportunity to work for smaller law firms. And so,
I was making the joke about the wheelbarrow because that's hilarious. Not all lawyers are making a lot of money. And that's kind of what I wanted to make sure that people understand. It depends on where you land. So, I underscored that first year of law school thing. It's most of those kids that do very well end up at the big firms that pay the big money, right? So if you don't do well in that first year, your chances kind of decline unless you're a late bloomer. So if you want to set yourself up for the big money and you're doing it for the big money, line yourself up accordingly. And that's okay. I'm not judging if that's what you want. That's cool. That's how you buy the good clothes, right? So
well, I don't understand the taboo. Everyone kind of works for the purpose of making
money, right?
But,
so
to set
haters
yourself...
gonna hate.
Yeah.
So don't hate.
Anyways,
but the point is, like, exactly to your point, everyone's just, working to make money. Otherwise, we would all be at a beach somewhere. So enjoying our life. That's why we work. So, and so, we can buy the things that we would like or need. So there's nothing wrong with wanting money. It just don't get obsessed with this. I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
And and sometimes it's not always about the money. There's other things that are more valuable in life than just money. And there's a certain point you'll hit where it won't even matter. But that's a different discussion. The point is, lawyers do not necessarily always make money, big money. I started out, because I was a late bloomer, at a smaller firm, amazing lawyers. And by the way, just because you're at a small firm or a big firm doesn't speak to the quality of your legal expertise. I worked with amazing lawyers at my first firm that I got a job at. They were extremely competent, very diligent, very hardworking, but, it was in a smaller community. And so the market is dictated by the nature of the community and the population and what it can pay. It's supply and demand. So the rates are dictated by what people are, the ability to pay.
So like for those firms, you're basically negotiating your contracts.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a set, like, at the big firms, even in Canada, it's a set salary that you're going to get paid as a first year, as a second year, as a first year associate. And during your articling, it's all in a booklet that is distributed, and it's extremely regulated by the Law Society of Ontario. And it's also, all the firms in the US, for example, disclose that information as to what you're going to be paid. So, because they're big law and they all are competing with each other. So all of that information is out there. But for small firms, that information is not available. So you need to individually negotiate, but also level set your expectations. You can't look at the numbers in those booklets and data from big firms. They're not going to be able to, pay those rates. So yeah, not all and there's lawyers that are in those extremely amazing lawyers, like I said, but they're not making the money, the big money, right? They're making good money. Eventually they'll get to the point where they're living decent lives, but they're not balling by any measure. So exactly. So, I mean, they're all going to be fine. But in your junior years, for sure, like, you're not making a lot of money. I mean, I was certainly making well below 100. So, I mean, now, I mean, you would be destitute at this point with inflation. But anyway, the point is, that, not everyone's making a lot of money. In-house, for example, that's another thing to consider depends on where you are, what size the entity is, what's their business services, how their CEO perceives legal, because, some CEOs perceive legal as business partners that are necessary partners as part of doing business. Some places consider you to be a cost center, something we have to have, but would wish we didn't have to. So it's a very different mindset, and you are rewarded and paid and compensated accordingly. So it's important to know what kind of culture you're going into, even in-house. So it's a mixed bag. Remember, you're looking at companies. So company cultures vary, and their mindset and their legal departments will vary, and the compensation varies. But by and large, you could say that firms pay the best because their business is legal services. So you are the bread and butter. So when you are the business, you're going to get paid. So compensation-wise, generally big law pays the best. In-house depends on the size of the company, pays somewhere in the middle, and small firms and small practices probably the least. So just something to consider. And then there's also government and public practice, and government is also decent, probably somewhere between firms and in-house at a company, depending on what size company. Like a Nike is probably paying, at a very senior position very well and well above what the government would pay. But the U.S. government, there's departments where you get paid close to $300,000, which is a lot. Like the SEC pays very well, and a lot of these departments pay very, very well. So, but there's also positions that are paying like 180, 170, 160, which is also great. But there's a range, right? And it's public, it's tax money. Remember, tax money is paying your salary. So obviously it's not going to be as high as a for-profit law firm.
It's thank you for pointing out that not all lawyers make money. Because I mean, same thing with me. When I started, you're saying under 100. I was earning $33,000 in my first year. Second year, I got a bump to, I think, somewhere like 80, I think. And then after that, it picked up. The thing is, like, once you demonstrate that you're competent, then you kind of have to be aggressive. I remember when I was at a smaller firm, I went and I asked for more money. And it's not like I was due for a raise. I was just like, listen, I'm rendering a lot of services.
Yeah.
Like these are unbelievable hours. Pay up. But in big law, I think it's called the Cravath scale.
I mean, it keeps on changing. Milbank or whatever. Someone who trips someone else up and says like, "Hey, we're gonna pay you more." And so, I think
last I checked,
the Cravath scale. I think
you
it
can
was.
check the Cravath scale. I'm gonna try to put the current scale.
Cravath is a large law firm in the United States. So that's why it's called the Cravath scale, because that firm set the scale and came out to the market and say, we're going to start paying this. And then people got in line if they wanted to keep their associates, because otherwise people would just go to Cravath. Yeah. So that's kind of why it's called the Cravath scale. So just to provide context to our listeners.
Thank you. I mean, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty about how much you make at 5 years, 10 years.
It's all publicly available information out on the internet. You can see what a first year makes. I think first years are now starting at 220 or 215.
Yeah.
So that gives you visibility, and I think the scale all the way up to 8th year associate is like 415. So
something like that.
Like that. So and then there's bonuses too.
Oh, yeah.
Don't forget that. So there's bonuses generally, and even that is public. What you can expect. I think it ranges from the lowest level of $15,000 all the way up to like, I don't know, 100 something, all the way up. So
my God,
exactly. So,
well, it's a salary.
It is a salary.
100K is a salary in itself.
So, I mean, if you, and there's firms, you have to see which ones. Some, if you bill above the 2,000, reward you for that extra work. And some firms, they don't care. You're still going to get whatever's on the scale. So you kind of have to watch that. Like there's certain large firms, the white shoe firms, they call them, they will pay you for the 2,300 hours if you're somehow able to do that, which is hard, a lot of hours, but at least they compensate you. Sometimes you're busy and you will work those hours and you won't get paid. You'll just get the maximum. You will not get anything. You will not be compensated for that extra 300 hours that you worked. So if you're, but
in excess.
So, but what I'm saying is that's another consideration. If you have short-term goals that you really want to hit and they constitute money.
Pay me the money. But a lot of professions have special perks, random things. Nurses work 3 days and they have 4 days off. I learned accountants take a long weekend for the entire year, except for January to April.
Tax season,
and something else as well. Some other season, there were 2 seasons.
Audit?
Something like that. Yeah. Oh, it was audit season.
Okay.
And so, I mean, do you not like similar to that, but are there some cool things about being a lawyer as well? I know a few.
Cool things? What do you mean?
I know, for instance,
features?
I know we get better mortgage rates.
Oh, yeah,
for instance.
yeah.
Some random things that make being a lawyer cool.
I think the respect. I'm just I mean, people treat you like you're smart. I'm just joking.
That is true.
That is true.
Yeah. Remember
but mostly,
the hospital?
Yeah, that's true. People. Oh, yeah. So let me tell you about this. So I am not one of those to pull out my I'm a lawyer kind of card. But suddenly, if people who like to treat people like dirt sometimes, pulling that out may give you better services. So I had a little emergency in my eye, and the person was treating me very poorly
at a hospital.
I was being treated very, very poorly, and I was too distraught given my medical emergency. But my husband had to say, yeah, she kind of needs her eye because she's a lawyer. And And I'm like, everyone needs their iPod. That's why I said inside, but not only lawyers, but okay. But you should have seen, it was theatrical how quickly this person switched. It was like, cut in a theater scene. He went out and I heard him say to people like, she's a lawyer. And people were like, oh, I waited in that emerge for like 4 or 5 hours. I had like a very bad eye emergency. I was literally like shivering. But anyway, the second he came back, he was like, oh, I'm so sorry you had to wait. I've set this up, this follow up and everything. Before he was giving me all sorts of bad attitude. It's like I met a different person. So yeah, there's suddenly, I guess, I don't know if it's respect or fear. I think it's more fear because they know that you can probably sue them and you have probably people assume that you have the resources or the mental capacity to figure out how to sue them. So yeah, that's probably a great perk. People are kind of scared of you. So like
It's true though. It's really unfortunate. I have a story as well. My wife, when she was pregnant, we went to the doctors and, she's just wearing a jumpsuit, I guess. And she went to go get her checked and she was getting, I'm not going to say negligent, but it was just like mediocre service. And then that day I had to go to work. And so because the appointment was in the morning, I had to wear a suit. And I was wearing a suit. And the second I got in, it was theatrical. She's like, oh my God, where do you work? And, oh, you work at a law firm. Oh, then you can afford this, this, and that. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, like, what the hell does this have to do with me having a baby, right?
Yeah.
The services should not change based on, but anyways, I don't want to,
But that's the world we live in. That's,
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to change for those who are in high school right now. that people will suddenly become enlightened and realize that, they should treat people well regardless of what they do. So yeah, that's a perk that you'll get in this world that we live in. So that's that. And then, I mean, other perks are, eventually you hit a certain point in your career where you're senior enough and you can kind of manage your plate and manage your life and you're doing, I think what I find a perk is intellectually stimulating work forever, right? A lot of people hit, ceilings and they're like bored. The law is always developing. Like tomorrow the FDIC is going to come up with something. So there's always new regulation and stuff like that. So there's new laws evolving. So that keeps, for me, it's great because it's like, some people like puzzles. I like puzzles and you're always learning and stuff like that. So that I think is another perk for people who get bored. I get bored. So if you're looking for a lifelong of puzzles, having something like that, then I think that's another perk. And I think that this profession can give you independence as well at a certain point when you get senior enough. Do not have those expectations for like the first 10, 12 years of your profession. It's like really just coming to me like, I think for the first 10. After that, I think you're pretty good. Yeah.
Talking about that, do you have work-life balance?
I mean, that is an interesting concept altogether.
It's an oxymoron.
I mean, listen, that's why, we have to have flexibility in our lives. The concept of 9 to 5 being in the office and all that kind of stuff, I think, has morphed and changed. And thank God for COVID. That's probably a perk that came from COVID. There was that's one thing that, society realized that they can work at home and have flexibility and people still get work done. So I think that with more remote work and allowing people to, manage their life, I think you can have balance. I wouldn't say that this is the profession to go to if that is what you're hoping for. It's going to be a challenge because it's the kind of profession that can eat your life. So you are going to have to push back and create boundaries. So there's a lot of other professions if you want to have a life. This one, you're going to have to viciously guard your life. A guard dog.
Let's be more specific. It's like, how many hours do you think? Okay, let's not talk now. Actually, I mean, you have to build 2,000 hours, but let's say those are billable hours, right? How many hours do you think you dedicate when you were towards the beginning of your career on a weekly basis? How much do you think you worked?
In the beginning, it was
Let's say like first like 5 years, because it's
years.
roughly that. Like,
Yeah, I think it hasn't really changed, to be honest. Like, I mean, the expectations are, like you said, it's 2,000 hours, and at a smaller firm, it was slightly less, and that's just the way it is. But even there, you're billing like 7 hours a day, while here to hit your hours, you're really billing 9. So, and that's billable. That doesn't count like all the administrative stuff or business development or whatever else you have to do,
or just like a normal human break, like going to the washroom and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah, that doesn't include that. So if you're billing 9 hours, that means like if you're going to take a lunch or whatever, like that means now your workday is 10 hours. And so forth. So just kind of building that mentally in. And oftentimes realistically, like when I'm in the office, I unplug, but I have a little one. So when I pick her up after work, and I from 5 to 8:30 till she sleeps, I don't do anything. I am 100% with my little one, and after that, when she sleeps, then I log back on and I have to work. So you have to be able to compartmentalize a little bit and know your boundaries and what's important. There are times where I can't be as present with her during those times, but those I have to be extremely extreme circumstances to warrant that, and you have to create those boundaries in this profession. So, and people need to respect them, and you need to viciously guard them, like I said. So, because people will try. This is a general thing. People will try to, if you don't dictate your own calendar, people will put time on your calendar. And actually, people put time on your calendar physically. They see an opening and they put a meeting on it. So like, that's not even like a metaphorical
Thanks,
thing.
Microsoft.
Yeah. So like, if you don't want people to do that, you have to protect your calendar. You have to protect your life. Exactly. It is. I mean, unfortunately, we only have 24 hours. That's just like the astronomical reality we have, so that's just what the earth gives us. So, we
can't negotiate that.
Can't negotiate that. So
come on, where's the contract for that?
And we have to, and you got to sleep,
Really?
The body requires that. So, I mean, there's a lot of limitations that are out of your control. And so and I would say that, first thing people try to do is cut their sleep. Don't do that. Try to get your 7 to 8 hours of sleep as much as you can. There's going to be nights where you're sleeping at 2, trying to get a document out. I am a little bit of a night owl. So after I plug back in, I may go for a couple hours and I may have to sacrifice a couple of hours, but don't make it a habit, because you're going to pay for it later in your life through, I don't know, a heart attack or some other medical condition and
Pretty
stuff
common.
like that. So, so you have to find balance, and, that's just, meditate, work out. Those are the things you're going to have to do. I mean, there's a lot of stories about Condoleezza Rice. Like, she used to work out, and she's just like, if there's something I cannot take care of while I'm working out, do not disturb me, she would say. And I'm like, that's good advice. She's just like, if someone's died, how on earth am I going to do anything about it? Like, a world leader has died. She's the Secretary of State, right? So, okay, he's dead. So tell me, like, after I'm done my workout. It's an extremely important if, like, Gaddafi died or whatever, whoever whatever it is, But she's like, how can I do something about it while I'm working out? Let me work out. So if Obama, Condoleezza Rice, all these people who are like, kind of doing important things in life, they can figure out to work out and take care of their bodies, I think all of us can too. So.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, they must be special. I've been struggling lately.
I know. Likewise, but they also have a lot of help, but that's not an excuse too. So they were doing those things even before they were in the positions that they were in. So
yeah, I mean, Obama looked good.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
I mean,
and Condoleezza Rice was fit. So
yeah, so I mean, I didn't take that in, to be honest.
Yes.
I just want to talk about that a little bit more, because I mean, you said you have to bill roughly 9 hours if you take a lunch, and I hope you do, a lot of the times I'm just eating lunch while working, but if you do take a lunch, like it'll leak into 10 hours going there, coming back, depending on your commute. I would say like a solid 12
12-hour
hours of
day.
your day is
Yeah.
dedicated towards work, then, and I want to just like outline that, because if you're getting, let's say 7 hours of sleep, because 8, I feel like is a privilege. You're a great sleeper. I'm not. So 7 hours of sleep, and now we got 12 hours dedicated to that. That takes us to 19 hours. And, just like regular things you have 5 hours for. And so you kind of have to budget like that. It is a demanding profession, and it's important to know before you get into that. And like why I started this podcast was kind of important, because it was like, what are you actually getting into? And you should know that, because in your 20s, all you care about is, I just need a good profession. In your 30s, you care more about work-life balance. In your 40s, you care even more about work-life balance. So it's important to know what your day looks like. And so thank you for narrowing down on that. But what do you like about being a lawyer? Outside
Yeah.
of respect, I've heard that a lot. And the fact you're a little bit of a nerd.
I mean, I like the intellectual rigor, and I think I take a little bit of pride in working hard. So I enjoy it.
Grit.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really like people who don't work hard.
Well, it makes sense.
Yeah. So I just feel like you should have a little bit of fire in your life. Something to like, get your energy in. Like whether it's like baking or whatever it is that you enjoy, a craft, whatever it is that you do, I feel like you should have sincerity and passion for it.
Fair enough.
And so I enjoy it because I think that it keeps me stimulated and there's always something to learn. So I like that it keeps going. It's the gift that keeps on giving. So
fair enough. So what do you dislike about, or what do you find challenging about being a lawyer?
I think it's the work-life balance challenges. It's the fact that I have to be a guard dog to, really preserve my life. That's the biggest challenge, because if you didn't have to do that as much, I think I would enjoy it way more. I think it's like the amount of hours. Like if I had to work less, like the 2,000 hours is way high. It's pretty demanding. So like obviously you're always butting heads with your life. The work seems to always try to win. And you don't want to, end up like 50, 60 and like all you've done is work, and all your hobbies are relegated to the sidelines, and you haven't enjoyed anything. You didn't intend anything for your children, because who cares about all the important things that they're doing in their life? So if you become that person, that's problematic, and that's why you have to maintain that balance. So I think I would love it if it was just less demanding, like in terms of hours, not necessarily in rigor, but hours.
I mean, I feel like you do all those things.
What do you mean?
Like you have, you spend time with your kid.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
go
absolutely.
on vacation.
Absolutely. And so you can do it, and numerous women have done it, and, lots of men have done it. People do it every single day and have great functioning relationships with their children and their spouses. But there's also people who choose the other route, and there's a prevalent divorce and lots of kids that don't like their parents because they made choices like they'd rather do work. So, you'll see both in this career, and I can see how it can easily make you into that person. So be vigilant of that. And there's partners that will say, this is a career where you have to choose the career. And you're like, okay, you make your choices. But when I'm on my deathbed, I'm not thinking about a memo, and I'm not thinking about the legal advice I gave my client. I'm thinking about my children, most likely. I hope I'm thinking about my children or the people that I care about the most when I'm dying, not my, that kind of stuff. But there are people who like, you have to submit yourself to this profession. But I'm sorry, I'm not a prophet, like I'm just a lawyer, right? So, I'm not like submitting myself to God's journey or whatever it is. Like, I think some people like take themselves a little bit too seriously, and not necessarily too seriously. It's just like they give themselves an elevated sense of self-importance to what they do in life. And I think it's important work. Don't Don't get me wrong, but it's not at the point where, it's prophetic. So figure it out.
Yeah. I'm the Jesus Christ
of the law.
of the law.
Like,
Lay down that.
I'm the Messiah. Like, come on, guys, chill out.
Oh my goodness. Don't cancel me, please.
Yeah, don't cancel me.
But okay, so I want to know, now that you have in excess of a decade of experience, I want you to like picture the Sumaira from however old you were when you just came out of law school and got a job. And I want you, like, what advice would you give that Sumaira?
The advice, I would say,
Because that person's, I'm pretty sure, is not as comfortable in delivering a work product, was nervous, et cetera, et cetera. So what advice would you give that person to make their journey through law easier, better?
I would say the advice I would give is work hard, be diligent, but maintain your sanity. So kind of going back to the traits that I talked about, you need those. So work hard, be diligent, and perseverant, but maintain your sanity in the process. So I think a lot of what I did was all of the former, but the sanity part, like it was a stressful journey, right? And I didn't do a lot of the things that people should be doing, like meditating and like taking care of their body, running, and health, taking care of your health, eating the right things. Like you tend to just eat poorly, whatever's available, all that kind of stuff takes a toll on you, and it doesn't show up when you're 20. It'll show up in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and so forth. So I think I would underscore the maintain your sanity and all the other stuff, you probably already have the necessary ingredients, which is, work hard and be diligent, but the latter part is harder.
Okay, so I'm trying to close off all my podcasts with short answers to the following questions. Hopefully they're just one-liners, and we can expand on them a little bit more. I want to know what is the best career advice you've gotten, and I want to know what is the worst career advice you've gotten.
The best career advice is kind of piggybacking off what I just said is make sure to do whatever is necessary to maintain your sanity, because people will challenge it. So just maintaining that, because we've talked about work-life balance. So make sure you maintain your sanity. And the worst, I would say, a couple of people have said to me, it's a dog-eat-dog world. Do whatever you got to do, to maintain your position and to succeed. I think that's the worst advice, because I don't think the world sucks that much and all people are not that bad. There's a lot of people that have helped me along the way that had no interest to do so other than just their goodwill. They exist. And then there's people who suck at life and have nothing to do with anybody, and don't want to really help anybody. But the thing is, like, this is a career based on professional responsibility and ethics, and making sure that you maintain that certain level of your morality at all times, because it will get challenged. And you shouldn't do whatever it takes to succeed, and you shouldn't trample on people, even if it means taking ownership. There's going to be people who will blame you for stuff, will throw you under the bus. It wasn't even your fault. But it's okay. You don't make yourself a worse person. Yeah. And that will get challenged, because this is that kind of career, which it's an all-encompassing, eat you alive monster, like in some ways. But it's a noble career, but there are going to be challenges to your morality, and you have to try to pick the right side.
I've seen a lot of shady stuff, and so I couldn't agree more. It happens way too frequently that you do have to make that choice, and so you have to subscribe to a moral compass at some point. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you're right. I never thought of it like that. But anyways, thank you so much. I feel like people have a pretty good idea of what the profession entails, the type of folk it involves. And I hope you guys found it very, very helpful and insightful. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that's it for this episode of the My Career Shop podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a better idea of how to become a lawyer and what to expect when you actually become one. Details about this episode and the career of an attorney are on the My Career Shop website, links to which are either in the description below or show notes based on where you are watching or listening from. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, leave a review, and comment on what professions you want me to invite next and what other information you would be interested in learning. See you soon.